America has been swamped by an obesity and diabetes epidemic since 1980. It begins in 1980, not in 1970, 1960. As the guidelines come out, we get Americans become obese and diabetic. And you would think anyone with some sense will realize, gosh, what caused it. They will come out with guidelines in 2015, and I can guarantee you they will still say that the basis for your diet must be grains and cereals. Why? Because there's a political decision that we cannot sustain a diet like this. The world cannot sustain this type of diet. So therefore we must kill people by feeding them grains and cereals. I think the reality is this works because it's biologically based. We've been given wrong information about what our nutrition should be, and you have to understand the only way to get right is exactly as David said. You've got to get back into the kitchen and cook your own foods. And that's the key point. We were not designed to eat cereals and grains to a great extent. Cereals and grains came into human evolution 12,000 years ago. If you have a clock that goes for 24 hours, cereals and grains came in 5 minutes ago. If we're at midnight, cereals and grains came in 5 minutes ago, and sugar came in 5 seconds ago. And the intake of sugar has gone up about 200-fold. So if you want to look at why are humans obese and fat today, all you have to do is look back for the last 5 minutes of our evolution, the last 12,000 years, and all the answers are there. Sean Watson was really interesting because his father has diabetes and is treated by the best specialists in Australia, and guess what? He gets worse because he's told to eat a high carbohydrate diet. And now Sean Watson decides he wants to take home the book for his father to fix him up. He tells me that Sean Watson said, this is a classic story, he said, I was always overweight. I was always the overweight kid at school. So although he's this brilliant athlete, he was always overweight. And he said at the start of the cricket season, I would starve myself to be in reasonable shape. But during the season, because of the stresses and strains, I would get progressively fatter and I would get injured. He says now on this new diet, his weight control is perfect. He knows he will never have a problem again with weight control, which was worrying him because he thought as soon as I stop exercising, I'll be in trouble. And he said, most interestingly, he can now bowl 2 or 3 sessions in a cricket match, and he's not stiff the second over. So he does bowl 6 overs, he has a break. He says, the first ball I bowl in the second set will be perfect. Before, it used to take me at least an over to warm up. And we think that's because of the inflammation that this diet causes us. Then Steve Smith, and then David Warner, who was a top athlete in the competition. David Warner scored over 500 runs. He scored a couple of centuries. He said, it is unbelievable. And on Twitter, he said, it is the most important thing that's ever happened in my career, my cricket career. Yeah. He says, I never get tired batting anymore. Yeah. World-class athletes performing better on this diet. And if you watch David Warner, you would see this guy's not short of energy on this high-fat diet. I spend a lot of time focusing on cholesterol because cholesterol by itself is not the cause of heart disease. And I try to explain that at great length. And that is the point that we're always told, if I eat a high-fat diet, my cholesterol will go up. That is not true. 1/3 of people normalize their cholesterol on a high-fat diet. 1/3 normalize, 1/3 stay the same, and 1/3 rise. And what I show you in the book is the 1/3 that rise, their cholesterol is still healthier for them than if they'd been eating the high carbohydrate diet. And that's a complex point to make. Bill Gates believes the future lies in GMO modified grains. And the frightening thing is that if you eat GMO grains, you will be sick, and you will be really sick. And he doesn't understand the medical side. So I don't understand the sustainability issue. I'm not an expert. But I do know the medical side. You cannot eat GMO grains because that's going to kill us even quicker. Yeah. That's the real problem. Yeah. There is a feeling that grains are a cause of inflammation, whole body inflammation, and that it's just got worse with changing the protein structure of the grains to become even more foreign to what we are used to. So for example, the gluten content of the modern grain is about 50% higher than it was in the past, and it's got a whole bunch of new change proteins, because the whole point of GMO is to modify the grain so it'll grow faster and it'll be resistant to bacteria. You eat it it has effects on your body. Those same changes will produce changes in your body. David Perlmutter, who's a neurologist in America, he's published a book called Grain Brain, in which he says the basis of dementia and Alzheimer's disease is the modified grains that we're eating today. I'm not suggesting he's right, but for a scientist to go out on a limb and say that means, and he's a reputable scientist and a reputable clinician, he must have some concerns about it. His belief is that the grains not only cause inflammation in your gut, but in the brain as well. I'll come back to the Australian cricketers. There's another guy I didn't mention who was not in the international team, but who was on methotrexate for widespread muscle and joint pain. He could barely train. Now, methotrexate is one of the most toxic ingredients that we provide in medicine. Within 3 weeks of going off his grains, he was completely off the methotrexate and able to train again. All pain disappeared completely. And now people say, you know, Sally Ann and I sound like we're faith healers. We're just reporting what we see and what happens and what people write to us on the internet. So my feeling is very strongly about cereals and grains, that they are just very damaging to your health. Yeah. You know, that goes to the whole core. Let me answer at different levels. The first thing is, the key to this approach is each of us vary in our insulin resistance. And if you are profoundly insulin resistant, like I am, and might maybe have a diagnosis of diabetes, when you take carbohydrate, you cannot metabolize it normally. And people have to understand that. And there are certain backup ways to get rid of the carbohydrate, which is so damaging if you're insulin resistant. So you turn it into fat. Now the key is that however insulin resistant or insulin sensitive you are, there's only so many grams of carbohydrate you can eat each day. If you're like me, 25 grams of carbohydrate is all you may eat a day. That's it. If you're more insulin sensitive, it might be 100, it might be 150. Let's say you're 30 kilograms overweight. I will tell you that that means you're profoundly insulin resistant. And the only way you will lose the weight is to get your carbohydrate intake in grams per day below the cutoff at which you lose weight. And for me, and the difference is 15 grams of carbohydrate on either side. If you are eating 15 to 20 grams too much, you will not lose that weight. And you will wonder why. Because no one ever told you that that's the problem. You've got to get the grams of carbohydrate down below your threshold. And for me, it's 25. And to go up to 100, I would just put on weight and get progressively sicker. Now 100, let's see, what is 25 grams of carbohydrate? It's 1 apple. 1 apple. What happens when a lady who's a little overweight goes to a dietitian? What do they say? You must eat fruit because it's healthy. So you must eat an apple and a banana each day. And what happens? That's your 50 grams. That knocks you to 120 grams and you will not lose weight. And you will stay fat for the rest of your life. And so you have to understand that. And that's why the book is so successful, because we tell you, you've got to get down below the key amount of carbohydrate grams. So in your case, you're pretty insulin tolerant.
You're losing weight.
Yeah. And you've cut down a lot on your carbohydrate intake. That potato may well be just enough to push your grams of carbohydrate up to 100, and that stops your weight loss. But if you take a banana and a couple of apples and potatoes, maybe you get up to 200 grams, you'll start putting on weight again. And you won't feel as good. That's the key. Why? Because you change the gut bacteria. That's the key. So that the key to our health is the bacteria that we have in the gut. And if you modify them by changing and eating too much carbohydrate, you start to feel sick again. So that's the delicate balance. It's firstly, it's the grams of carbohydrate, and it's secondly, the effect they have on your gut flora. Okay, so the first thing you all need to understand is that the blood cholesterol test that the doctor gave for you is utterly, completely useless. It predicts absolutely nothing. You have to understand that, and I explain it in the book. There have been many studies where people have died and they've measured their cholesterol beforehand. Now, if cholesterol is the sole cause of arterial damage, then there should be a linear relationship. So the more cholesterol in the blood, the more arterial damage. That, ladies and gentlemen, in 60 years of research has never been shown. You can have a low cholesterol and extremely severe coronary artery disease. You can have a high cholesterol, have extremely absent coronary artery disease. Your cholesterol, I promise you, tells you nothing about the state of your arteries. And that was confirmed again 2 weeks ago, because the only thing that really tells you how bad your arteries are is if we can scan them for calcium. And there was a study reported 2 weeks ago in the Journal of American Medical Association, which is important. And they scanned the chests of these guys and they looked for the relationship to cholesterol, and guess what? There was no relationship. So knowing your cholesterol, but there was a strong relationship to diabetes, because diabetes is what damages your arteries. And at the serial killers launch, one of the top surgeons in Cape Town got up and said, "Dr. Noakes, I'm tired of hearing all the story about strokes and heart attacks." He says, "Every day I'm cutting off limbs from diabetics." That's the disease we have to focus on. And that's the reality. If you want to damage your arteries, you need to get diabetes. And what causes damage is your blood glucose rising up and down. What causes your blood glucose to rise up and down? High carbohydrate diets. So now, okay, so this is the next message. If you want to know how healthy you are, you need to know, firstly, what is your fasting insulin? When you wake up in the morning, how much insulin is in your bloodstream? The more insulin, the more you are secreting insulin to try and get your glucose into normal control. So that's the first thing. The second thing is your glycated hemoglobin, or HbA1c value. And that tells us what your glucose is during the day. And the higher it is, the worse. If it's above 5.5, you're on the road to diabetes and heart disease. No one ever tells you that. With those two measurements, you know something about your health. And I would estimate that most of us here probably have an HbA1c above 5.5. In other words, we need to be looking at it and taking it seriously. The third thing, to get a little bit more complex, because this answers the cholesterol story. If you want to know what cholesterol measure hurts you, it's the small, dense LDL particles. So when your doctor says you've got a total cholesterol of X, he often tells you you've got the bad cholesterol, the LDL cholesterol, and he'll give you a number. And he'll say your LDL cholesterol is too high. What he doesn't tell you is that LDL cholesterol is made up of 3 components. Only one of them is bad, and the other 2 are completely neutral. So you can have a high LDL cholesterol and be perfectly healthy if all the LDL cholesterol is in big, fluffy particles. They are completely innocuous. So you can have a cholesterol of 8 and not have any disease because all your LDL is in these fluffy compartments. You can have a total cholesterol of 3 and be on death's door because all your LDL cholesterol is in the small bad particles. And some of the worst patients I've ever seen have low LDL cholesterol, have low total cholesterol and low LDL cholesterol, but it's all in these small dangerous particles. The reason you don't know about that is because it's difficult to measure the small LDL particles. And so what did industry say? We won't confuse the public. We will make it easy for them. We'll just say, measure your cholesterol. Industry came along and said, great, this is an opportunity. Let's lower the cholesterol and we'll cure heart disease. So they developed drugs to lower cholesterol. And they are called statins. And they are highly effective at lowering your cholesterol. But what did I tell you? Cholesterol does not predict what your arteries look like. So you can predict, if my theory is correct, that lowering your cholesterol with statins should have no effect on your heart disease risk. That's what I would say. Okay? It's not what you're told. So I will tell you the one statistic you need to know. If I have a relatively healthy heart, if I have a high cholesterol and I'm treated with statins, what you need to ask the doctor is, doctor, how many people like me must be treated with statins for me to get benefit? Okay? So you'd normally say, well, I mean, if every second patient benefited, that's great. If every third patient benefited, then that's fine. If every fourth patient benefited, well, I'm not sure I'd want to take that medication. And certainly if every 20th patient benefited, in other words, 19 people didn't benefit, but the 20th benefited, I probably wouldn't take that drug. Well, let me tell you what the story is, and this is absolutely gospel. For every 140 patients treated on statins, 1 benefits, and 139 do not benefit. Statins are the most ineffective drugs ever made in medicine. Would you take a drug that helps 1 person in 140? You'd be mad too, because the other 139 will get complications. So that alone tells you that any theory based on cholesterol and cholesterol lowering in heart disease doesn't sound right. It's not working. Did that answer your question? So the answer is no female and no male without established heart disease should be taking a statin, unless you think that 1 in 140 is worth taking a risk. That's fine. If that's what you want to take, that's fine.
So I've got a friend who wants to go off tomorrow.
He may go off tomorrow. Absolutely.
He's been a month on your diet. He's seen his weight drop off him. He can see his ankles for the first time in 10 years. And he's and he wants to go off his statins, but he wants to talk to his cardiologist first.
Yeah. No, you mustn't talk to the cardiologist. Will tell you have to stay on it, because the cardiologist is scared that if you have a heart attack tomorrow, you're going to come back and say it was caused by stopping the statins. Yeah.
So you, between the devil and the deep blue sea.
You make a decision, but you have to know the statistics, and the statistics are 1 in 140. And I can go to court tomorrow and stay and prove that statement. So you have to decide. Is it worth taking this drug, which has so many complications and so many risks, and 2% of people will get diabetes taking the drug, 2%, which is more than will benefit. The reason why we get fat is because the control in the brain called the apostat has got damaged, and that's what happened with the 1980 guidelines. These high carbohydrate diets damage the control. So normally, to have a normal weight, the calories in and calories out must be in balance. People think that we just become fat and because we're lazy. It's not true. If you do less exercise, so your expenditure goes down, in a regulated system, your intake must go down, and they will balance, and your weight will stay the same. So all of us who are on this diet, it doesn't matter whether we exercise today or not, are weight stable, because we will just adjust the food intake the next 24 hours, 48 hours. What's happened in your case is the apostat has got stuck, and it's now causing you to eat more calories than you need. Now, we don't know how to unstick the apostat as yet. In the people who are the most successful, the apostat goes right down, and the calorie consumption goes way down, and they're not hungry at that. Your problem is you're more hungry than you should be.
Yeah, but that's the point of not hungry. I have got like 1,000
Yeah.
So that's not, do I drop that even lower?
No. Again, I think you need to speak to Sally, but I think once you cut your calories below 1,200, I'm not sure that it's healthy, because your nutrient intake becomes too low for your health. Okay.
Big hand clap. Big hand clap. And any others, the books are now for sale. There's Polly.